Hey everyone, let's see. Welcome to After Hours. We got some people starting to make their way in. We are excited to have you on with us tonight. We got a great panel lined up, and again, tonight is all about music advocacy. We're going to be talking about how to make music programs the cornerstone of our communities and what we can do to position them in a way that people want to be a part of your program and they want to come and enjoy part of that excitement and also enjoy the benefits of music. A lot of great things that are going on inside of our program. So now we're going to talk about how to communicate it with our community. So we're going to go ahead and get started in just a minute as everybody makes their way inside. Before we do that, I want to make just a couple of announcements for everyone. Again, I'll be your moderator tonight. We're going to introduce our panelists in just a minute. If you have a question for our panelists, if you would, put it over in the questions box. We have both a chat and we have a questions box. And so if you have a question for the group, be sure that you put it in the questions box for us, because that's what we're going to be able to see tonight during the session. Also, if you're joining us using a Zoom ID, that means I do not have your email address. So if you don't mind and you want access to tonight's resources or professional development letters, be sure that you send me an email, Nick, N-I-C-K, @amromusic.com, so I can ensure that you get the resources from tonight's conversation. So again, Nick, N-I-C-K, @amromusic.com. Next week, May 12th, we're talking about marching band season. I know there's a lot of questions as it relates to marching band. So we're just going to explore some of the what ifs. We've got another great panel lined up. And so if you're wanting to join us, be sure that you register. We're going to have a different Zoom ID for that, so you will need to re-register for next week's conversation on marching band. And then at this time, next week is our last conversation. When we scheduled all of these at the beginning of the school closures, to be honest, we didn't think all of this was still going to be going on, but here we are, and such is life. So here's the next question. What are we going to do with After Hours? We would love to hear your thoughts. What are some other topics that you would like to see us explore? Do we need to continue this into the future? Maybe consider it monthly. We don't have the answers to that, but we want to hear your thoughts. So if you could email me, nick@amromusic.com, I would love to hear the things that you've liked about After Hours, how we can improve it, and how we should continue it into the future. So on that note, it looks like we've got everybody in. We've got all of our panelists here, and I'm going to turn it over to them. So to our panelists, welcome. If you don't mind, share with everyone who you are, what you do, where you are, and then I want to kick tonight off with some positivity. In one or two sentences, if you could share with us something that has warmed your heart or uplifted your spirit since all of this happened, that would be wonderful. So LaDonna, I'll start with you. Welcome.
Thanks for having me here. And I am LaDonna Gibson. I taught for 17 years. The last 16 of those were at Bald Knob High School. And I'm with Amro Music now, and my 21st year at Amro, and on the school board at Bald Knob. And the thing, I'll have to put a plug in for Bald Knob for the thing that warmed my heart, because the administration, the school board, the teachers have all gone overboard to try to make everything work. This is not the best place in the world for internet service. There's quite a few without it. We have a lot of hotspots that have been given out, a lot of Chromebooks and MiFi, and lunches are going out every day. And teachers have volunteered and are taking those lunches out to kids all over the area, which is a pretty wide area because it's rural. And so it's just a plug there, and that's been a very positive.
That's fabulous. Thanks, LaDonna. Todd, how are you? Good to see you.
Hey everyone, and thanks for having me, Nick and Amro. I'm so excited that you guys have put together this awesome opportunity for people in the state and in the area. My name is Todd Shipley. I am the Fine Arts Coordinator at the Tennessee Department of Education. I've been in that role for 2 years now. Prior to that, I was a music educator, band director in Metro Nashville Public Schools and also Rutherford County Schools. And my job today really entails kind of all things fine arts and being the voice for fine arts educators and students at the seat and the table where all the decisions are made in Nashville for education in the state. And so I deal with everything from licensure to evaluation to standards and curriculum development, program design, and also just the general person who can get you to the right information, hopefully, for all those questions that educators may have and helping manage a unique partnership with the Country Music Association Foundation called State of the Arts, which is focused on increasing access to arts opportunities for students across the state, K through 12, presented during the school day by a certified arts educator. One of the things that I think that has been really unique about this time that we're in is the fact, and I'll echo a lot of what LaDonna was saying, those same things have been really awesome here as well, seeing people working together. But really, for me, it's been about seeing all the different collaboration that's happening, particularly among people and groups that don't frequently collaborate together. Like there have been a lot of people in various industries that have been collaborating with the education community and with teachers, but also from teachers to administrators within school districts. I think there's been a lot more collaboration than typically happens in the everyday, typical, normal world that we live in. So I think really, hopefully, we'll come out of this with a little bit more of an opportunity to engage in collaboration and be stakeholders in what we do from a more equal footing, I think.
Yeah, that's so true, Todd. The collaboration has been absolutely awesome. The ideas being shared. So, Nola, welcome. We're so glad you made it. Hopefully you can hear us. I understand that you were impacted by these storms, and so I'm glad you were able to join us tonight. How are things with you? How are you in Nashville?
So if you can hear me, give me a thumbs up.
Yeah, we can hear you. Uh-oh, we might have just lost you there, Nola. I have to do the thumbs down now, Nola. We lost you.
Okay, cool. It came back on.
Okay, yeah, we might have to go without video. Sorry about that, Nola. Let's try again.
Well, let me try that. Let me try taking the video off. Does that work?
That's much better, yeah.
Okay, let's do it. Let's do it. So this is what we've learned, that communicating in a virtual world sometimes presents challenges. and what we're seeing is that adversity does not build character, builds character, and the character of the teachers and the work that they're doing is remarkable all across the country. If you need a bright spot, just look at a teacher. That's where we are right now. I just got off the phone with Bob Morrison, and he was talking about, the standards have not changed. We're still charged with providing a well-rounded education for every student. The what has not changed. The how may look a little differently, but the what is no different, and we're all just as committed. So my name is Nola Jones, and I'm the Director of Educational Programs for Constelmer Instruments.
Fabulous. We're so glad you're here, Nolan. We're so glad you're safe too. I know those storms a couple of nights ago were very scary, and saw some real terrifying pictures. So glad you are okay. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So again, tonight's conversation all about advocacy. So to kick us off, sometimes I think people hear the word advocacy and what they envision is this big grand gesture, maybe people in suits and ties that are limited to certain people, but not me. But I think there's a reality that anyone can advocate for music. And so, Todd, why don't you kick us off? What are some things that anyone can do to be an advocate for music education?
Well, I think one of the most important things to understand is advocacy isn't just speaking to lawmakers or decision makers. You're an advocate in really everything that you do with your music program, not only to the students, but also just thinking about the different stakeholder groups that you serve and that you engage with on a day-to-day basis or throughout the year. That can look like parents, it can look like administrators, that can also look like other faculty in the school. So there are so many facets to how we approach advocacy, and we must move away from the idea of it being some enormous task. Advocacy can be as simple as sending out an email to invite the faculty of your school to your concert, sending a simple thank you note to a music vendor that's done something really awesome for you, or to sending especially positive notes to parents about awesome things that their kids are doing. Remember, always parents love to hear positive things about their kids. They never want to get those, and they always assume that call from the school or that email from the teacher is going to be a negative experience. but if you can turn that into a positive experience, that's a form of advocacy in and of itself. And it's also stepping back and thinking about what you are asking people to do. When you're engaging with stakeholders, generally, regardless of what kind of task it is, we're always asking people to do something for or on behalf of our programs. So, thinking back to the parents again, if we're sending out an email about concert attire, reminding the students that you're wearing all concert black, that's an opportunity to be an advocate, but just remembering that we are asking them to do something for us in that experience. And then there are also times where we're asking people to do things on behalf of our program. That could be like approaching a school board member or administrator at your school to advocate for your program, to get more funding, to establish another position, or to not cut the program. So really just kind of exploring all the different stakeholder groups, I think, is really important when looking at advocacy.
Yeah, that's a great point, Todd. And it sounds like the examples you just gave, there's kind of this two different batches. We have proactive advocacy and then reactive, and you identified some types of proactive and some types of reactive. LaDonna, what are some of your thoughts coming from an educator and school board on what is advocacy in your community?
Advocacy can be done by parents also, and not just the educator, but the parent is a stakeholder in the program. They need to know about the program and be involved in what performances are happening and be at the performances. But even more than that, especially in small towns, when you see someone, brag on the program that you saw, the marching band or the choir, whatever program it is, brag on what the kids did and learn why it is that music educators say everyone is important. Know why they say that, because it takes every student in every ensemble to make that ensemble. So they're all important, and it helps we know all those ways. It helps in so many ways. So help the parents become educated in that way so they can tell the principal when they run into them in the grocery store how great the band is and why it's so important in their family.
Yeah, I love that. Talking about it, kind of enlisting your tribe to all be a part of that activity. That's a great thought too. So Nola, how about you? You have a little bit more of a global perspective, both from an educator and an administrative standpoint. Any further thoughts that you might add on what is advocacy from a big picture?
Sure. I would elevate what both my colleagues have said. Advocacy is local, but it's also not local. It's everything that we do every single day in our classrooms and in the communities where we live, and then on a national level as well. I would point you all to the Arts Ed Tennessee. It's a statewide agency for arts advocacy that if you're not aware of this organization, you'll want to Google that and look it up and join. They're doing some tremendous work on the state level. I know Todd's been really active in their work. My work is more from a national level through the National Association of Music Merchants, through NAFME, through Elevate Arts Ed, those more national organizations. But it still comes down to the grassroots level that Todd said of what is it that we're asking for and what is it that we need. We don't want this time of uncertainty to be an opportunity or an excuse for just not doing arts education because we're not creative and we don't work hard enough and we don't put ourselves in the forefront. Now's the time where we need to link arms and really make sure that we're sending a unified message about that the work has not changed, the what has not changed, our standards are the same. A well-rounded education doesn't look any different just because we are not able to deliver it the way we always have. If anything, we can come out of this with more tools in the toolkit for how to provide and differentiate for what children need. So our work is more critical, not less critical.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, some of the problems that people are trying to solve and how we can leverage music to help solve those problems. So great points, Nola. Yeah, thank you so much. So as you can see, we've got a wonderful panel for today, all with great perspectives. So let's talk about one of the stakeholders, and that's the administrators at a particular school. Because again, this is a very grassroots conversation. We've got educators on from multiple states in the area, and they've got to be able to advocate to their administration. LaDonna, let's start with you. What can, as an educator, what can we do to communicate our successes to administrators that may not be aware of what's going on in the walls of our classroom?
Well, communication is the number one key. And it's not that uncommon that there may be administrators that aren't real familiar with what the program's doing or what the program's about and how it's built. And I always say that, you know, you are the professional and it's your job to promote your program. It's your job to let the school know and speak with authority. They expect you to be the professional, but keep it positive and always talk just about your program. And for administration, I would say that in most schools, if not all schools, they would appreciate a time where you set aside to speak with the administration and then maybe even present something short to the school board about what your year looks like at the very beginning of the year. It's important. It may take a little while, but let them know that it may take a little while. Come in prepared with a list of how the entire year works and what you're planning to do with your program and all the things that happen. If you're a football school, all the things that happen after that season is over and how it moves on completely to the end of the year and those dates and what all's going on with the dates. It's not that they don't want to know, it's that they need to be told. And most of them appreciate very much being told exactly what the music program is like. It's unbelievable how many administrators don't know what it means when you say the band is going to assessment or the choir is, or any music group, or, you know, they don't understand these things, or the difference between all district or all region and all state, and why one school is hosting one, but our school wouldn't be set up for that. There's so many things to explain to them and let them know why it's important when you're doing that. For the community, let your community see your program. Always let them see it. It's not always easy. And sometimes you've got parents going, man, we've been doing this every day. You've had something happening here. But it's so much better to be out in front and they're not expecting a perfect performance at a parade maybe, or at a nursing home, or an opening of something, maybe a small group. But whenever you can get a group out in front of the community. And you know, I know it's different in large towns, but in smaller towns, they're all about seeing the students. Whatever it is they're doing, they're all about seeing the students out. And they're very supportive of that too.
Yeah.
The
And I think that's,
communication is the number one thing, communication.
yeah. And LaDonna, I think you make such a good point. We really can't take for granted that people outside of the music world understand what we do and the significance, or maybe how hard these students have worked to achieve something like going to solo and ensemble or an assessment or a contest. And we should be prepared to proactively articulate that. So that's a great point, LaDonna. Todd, how about for you? What are some other ways, specifically as it relates to administrators, that we can continue to proactively advocate for our programs?
Well, and LaDonna made some awesome points there. To add on to some of the things she was saying, I believe that school-based administrators or site-based administrators are really the most important piece in our music program advocacy, just because, especially speaking from the Tennessee perspective, Tennessee is what's considered a local control state, meaning so my agency at the Tennessee Department of Education, we do not oversee and operate local schools and school districts. That's all done at the local level. And more often than not, the principal is the one that's guiding the decisions of that school. And so some things to add on to what LaDonna was saying, communication is certainly key. A couple of tidbits though that I notice is that we as music educators always go to administrators with problems all the time. Sometimes administrators probably roll their eyes when they see us coming down the hall and know that we're coming straight for them. So we have to always approach our interactions with administrators in that lens, and knowing that the band program, the choir program, the orchestra program, any of the music programs are just a small part of what goes on in a school building. It is our world, and we think and know that the value for our students, but also understand from an educator's perspective that the principal has so many spinning plates at the same time that they often don't just have the bandwidth to be able to devote or to understand. So like LaDonna was saying, educate them about the things that your program's doing, and learning how to speak their language is probably the most important morsel I can give you to work with those administrators, just because when dealing with stakeholders, any stakeholder, but particularly administrator, you have to understand what they value most, what is most important on their plate. Obviously, things like student safety and image are really big to administrators, and making sure that they have the funding to do the things that they need to do in the building, but also the accountability side of things. There is a lot on school principals these days, particularly with regards to accountability. So the more that we can learn to speak their language and to approach them with solutions on the front end, and not always go to them with problems asking them to fix it. Oftentimes, if we can find the solutions and present them and lay them out, administrators will be far more open to hearing those problems and will be able to have our back. And always remember that administrators need to know what's going on in that building. They should know what's happening with your program.
Yeah, great points, Todd. Nola, how about from you? Any other thoughts or suggestions on ways that we can continue to strengthen that communication point between the administrators and the music programs?
Sure. I think LaDonna and Todd have done a great job of encapsulating the essence of everything. A couple of things I might add. One of the most difficult things about being an administrator is that you're always dealing with problems, and if a student or a parent just makes a point to go into the office and say thank you to an administrator, or a note from a parent, like a handwritten note, not even an email is wonderful, but even a handwritten note to say, I realize that master scheduling for arts classes is a challenge, and we are grateful to have a visionary administrator in our building who values a well-rounded education for every student and access for every student. All means all. If you can, because they'll go weeks without anyone saying thank you for anything. And so when they do get a thank you, it really resonates with them. I was speaking with a really dear friend who's a chair of a large school system recently, and I was asking her, what can we do as advocates right now? And she said, oftentimes the school boards don't ever see the good things that are going on in the community. The only people they hear from are the people who are upset, and they're faced with such difficult decisions. So bring a small ensemble to perform or sing or do a video of a student singing a solo or playing a solo, and have that playing prior to the virtual school board meetings right now. Now's a really good time. They're looking for anything positive to share about what all the school districts are doing and how they're adapting. If you put signs in all your seniors' yards, take a video of that and send it to your school board and thank them for their continued support and belief in the importance of, just assume that and make sure that we thank them, because they don't hear that from anyone, and they're getting precious little of it now. And how much as teachers, how much it means to you. The other thing I would say in a building level, principals are human beings too. And many times they only get to deal with the problem children, and they don't hear from our kids. And if we took a poll right now, if we were on a platform where we could take a poll, I would guess that you would have to think hard to think of a student who didn't graduate on time if they were in band 4 years with you. Our graduation rate, on-time graduation rate, skyrockets. We know when they're in our programs. So have those kids that music has changed their life. Have them write a note and just a testimonial, if you will, of here's why music is important. I'm grateful to have gone to this school, and thank you for providing an opportunity so that every student that comes into this building will have the same opportunity that I did. Maybe you could gather the amount of scholarship money that your seniors are receiving for next year and send that forward to the school board. Just be creative about ways that you can amplify the message of the good work that you're doing. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. I get excited about this.
No,
it's so positive and so powerful, and we have such an opportunity right now that others don't have.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, Nola. I mean, the importance of just the words "thank you" and how you communicate that in a meaningful way can be so powerful. So, and we had a great suggestion here from our questions. Andrew Lynn shared. He just said, "Hey, our middle school band performs for a school board meeting every few years." And I mean, what a great way just to do something really simple. Hey, can we come play for the 15 minutes while people are making their way in, and just to to highlight what the kids are doing. And I remember another music educator shared something that I thought, man, that's so simple. It's a great idea. It was Sean Sullivan at Starkville High School down in Mississippi said, hey, Nick, once a year before our assessment, our high school band does a concert at lunch. And the kids get the jitters out of the way. They play their assessment pieces. It's a recruiting event because our young kids get to see the older kids. And it's an advocacy event because our administrators, who usually don't see what the band is doing, gets to hear the band perform. So he said, we do this lunch concert and it checks so many boxes for us. And I thought, man, what a simple, great, easy idea that they did. So Sean, if you're on here, thanks for the suggestion. Shout out to what I thought was a really good idea. So, okay, so we talked about administrators. What about some of the other stakeholders, our tribe as it relates, students, parents, boosters, alumni? How can we pull them into the fold and incorporate them as part of the advocacy efforts for our program? Todd, what are your thoughts on that?
So I've seen some really awesome things in the last couple of years, particularly with alumni. It's great that you mentioned that. And I think that alumni are such a powerful tool, not only as advocates to the community, and we can even help showcase what our great alumni have done after they leave us and matriculate away from our schools. But I think it's also a great recruitment piece because younger kids always look up to older kids. And so finding ways to use those alumni. And I'll also say one other overlooked, or really kind of two overlooked stakeholder groups are non-music students in the school building and also other faculty members in the school building. Because we really have to be purposeful about how we're engaging with the non-music students in our building. Of course, you know, we try to get the biggest programs that we can, but we really should have some degree of interaction with the non-music students, because that's a really good way to take the pulse of the culture of the school and also of your music program, to figure out how that fits into the larger picture of your school program. This is particularly salient for high school, I think, and just knowing how you fit in with athletics and how you're competing with, and I don't mean competing and trying to edge out other clubs and activities in the school, but just how your program is perceived in the school is a big deal. And then of course with the other faculty, I can remember countless times and hear countless stories daily almost about people saying, other faculty pulling their kids out of class or whatever. But other faculty members in the school building, it's really important that we engage with them in a positive way too, so that they feel valued, but also they support our programs. Because if the building principal sees other faculty members engage with the programs, then there's obviously a lot of value tied there. So I think those are kind of two hidden engagement opportunities that we often don't take advantage of enough.
Yeah. Great points, Todd. You're 100% correct. And again, I think sometimes a lot of us grow up in this music world, so we take for granted that everybody knows what we do. And so again, your points are very valid that, hey, they might have played sports or their kids might have played sports, so they have minimal exposure to the activities that we do. LaDonna, how about your thoughts? What are some other ways that we can incorporate the larger tribe into our success and program?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be able to start our booster program when I started teaching. And boosters are one of my favorite things now, because I'm talking about boosters with directors and how to have a strong program. And a lot of people do have, but I think boosters are a great way to incorporate parents, and then even in some cases, just teachers from the school. We called ours band fans, so we could have teachers and other people be a part of it. It wasn't just the parents that did that. And they did all kinds of things like a booster program should, and going to events and yelling for their kids. It's just a part of what they did. They took care of fundraising, all the fundraising, and they didn't dominate. And I would say that completely. They made sure that I was in the loop with everything. Sometimes it was things like, well, we need to change it, and that was fine. But I'm very much pro boosters. I know in some places there have been some bad experiences, but when handled right and parents knowing exactly what's going on in a program, and they should, as well as administrators, boosters can be a great value. And also with the alumni, having some programs to include alumni is great too, to bring them back in on stage, to have them at a football game, brings in the gate a little bit more, and play a piece and let them come out and play. We did that, and of course a couple of them mostly just held a horn. And they said that, but those were the ones that loved it the most. So it's a lot of fun, and having them back in is a lot of fun. And real quick too, one thing I learned having the studio after school program from alumni is I had several ask if there were ways that they could help pay for students to go to camps or different things like that. And I think we forget that there are some alumni from the program out there that maybe a student does need help with an instrument or help with a camp or what have you, and they'd be very willing to help as long as they know. But it's hard to think about that because we think everybody knows. We know and are so involved in it that we think everybody else knows too, and we just a matter of communicating what the needs are and having it clear for people to find that. Communication again.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think you're 100% right. Nola, anything that you might add on the tribe ideas here? We might have lost Nola for a minute. We'll bring her back in.
How about this? How's that? There we go. I just want y'all to know that y'all must be sending good juju because the power just came on for the first time in 3 days. We have liftoff.
Bravo.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, so when I think about people who can mobilize a community, I immediately shout out to my colleague, my former colleague at UT Martin, Dr. Julie Hill. Any of you who know Julie knows she can mobilize a community better than anyone I've ever seen. And what she does is she's relevant, she's active, she's positive, she's energetic. She looks for ways to get her students out into the community, and she never loses contact. Once you're in her fold and in her tribe, she never loses contact with you. And that's something that's really critical because like when alumni leave us, they may come back, but how do we stay connected with them on a regular basis? It needs to be like a spider web. Once you're in, you're in. And Julie's so great at doing that, and you want to be part of that, of her community, because you benefit from it greatly. And anyone who touches her and knows what she does, they benefit from it. So when I think of a model, that I close my eyes, I see her face, and so just think about ways that you can get connected to people and stay connected with them.
Yeah, she's a great example and doing some wonderful things up there. Right now with all of the school closures and the resources that she's putting together. But no, I think you bring up such a good point. How do we incorporate people into our program as soon as they graduate? How do we keep them in that fold and keep them in that web and don't let that excitement wane and continue to involve their skills and talents in our program? So that's a great point.
Well, again, I'll look to Julie on that because she doesn't do it to build her fiefdom or her kingdom. It's because it's for the greater good, and she's giving way more than she ever gets, and it comes back to her because you can't, who was it that said you can't help another person without helping yourself? And so in her outreach, it's always about what can I do for someone else first, and then it comes back to her times 10.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked a lot about proactive advocacy, and I want to talk a little bit about now reactive advocacy. And what I mean by that is that perhaps there's conversations within the community about cuts or the importance of arts and questioning of that, because I think there's kind of two sides to this. But before we do, I think we need to talk a little bit about ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, because I think this kind of sets the platform for the expectations for music accessibility in our community. So Todd, I'm going to let you kick us off. What exactly is ESSA, and what does that mean for a local music educator?
Thanks, Nick. I'm going to try to keep us at a nice 35,000 foot level view here and try not to get too deep into the weeds because we could spend days on unpacking this. But ESSA is the Every Student Succeeds Act. That's the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. So this was signed into law by President Obama back in 2015. And this replaces what everyone here likely knows as No Child Left Behind, or NCLB. A couple of really important things to know about ESSA is that NCLB heavily focused on academic success, largely through reading and math. As many of us probably remember, and were heavily involved in that a couple of years ago. ESSA, however, shifts the language from talking about core subjects to a well-rounded education, which is what we've been doing in the arts and what we've been advocating for in the arts for decades. And so with well-rounded education, one of the really important parts of ESSA is that there's a definition to well-rounded education. And it just so happens that music and the arts are both mentioned in the definition of a well-rounded education. That'll come back again in a second to help my next point. And the other really important piece, so we've got the definition and setting up, changing the language from core subjects to well-rounded, but we've also got ESSA as the funding stream. And so ESSA as a whole basically deals majorly with accountability for states, but also determining how schools and school districts and states receive federal education dollars. And a lot of that is through what we call title streams. So Title I, Title II, Title IV. Most all of us are probably familiar, at least at a high level, with Title I. But because of this well-rounded definition, this now opens up opportunities for supporting music and arts programs through Title I, which wasn't possible many, many years ago. So now Title I dollars can be spent on music and arts initiatives. Same thing for things like, I'll give a very high-level overview of specifically three. So Title I being one. Title II has to deal with professional development, and you can now use those funds to support professional development for arts educators. But then also one of the big things is Title IV. And there's been a large push in the last 2 years or so to make people aware of what Title IV is, and that's the Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grants. So all of these title programs are what are called block grants. And so this is a bucket of funding that basically provides supplemental funding to schools and districts in three broad areas. And that's to support a well-rounded education, supporting safe and healthy schools, and also supporting the effective use of technology. Well, remember the first one that I just said was access to that well-rounded education, which now goes back to that definition. So districts receive a certain allocation of Title IV funds based on a calculation from their Title I funding streams. And the Title IV can be used to support various initiatives in the arts. So one of the things that's really important to note, though, is that most all federal dollars, there's a component of federal funding that's called supplement, not supplant. So these funds are geared to supplement or to enrich what local and state governments are doing in education. They're not to replace the funds. So if a school district is already spending funds in a certain area on a certain activity or strategy, then it's not like these federal dollars could come in and replace that. This is above and beyond. So you're not going to get things like a general budget allocation for your choir programs out of ESSA. That's not what this is really for, but this is to establish some unique and interesting programs. So a couple of examples of how this has been used in Tennessee. Within the last 2 or 3 years or so, we've had a significant increase in the number of districts in Tennessee that are using these funds for arts education. And so some that I've seen recently from this past funding year include helping fund a fine arts district support personnel, so like a fine arts coordinator at the district level. I've also seen purchasing of instruments to help build an elementary instrument program, so purchasing ORF instruments, purchasing recorders. There are a number of various things that these funds can be used for to help support school plans and school improvement. And one thing, though, that's really important for educators to understand is that with this funding stream, districts can elect to shift those Title IV dollars to another funding stream. So they can choose to spend no money in access to rounded, safe and healthy, and then effective use of technology, and shift all of that. Usually most of them shift it to Title I, because we are talking about only a very small percentage of funds. It's not like we're talking about millions and millions of dollars for every school district. In some situations, depending on the size of you may only get $30,000 in that bucket. However, the advocacy piece is where this comes in to really speaking for how those funds are used. And the community is supposed to be a part of the decision-making process at the local level for these funds. So recruiting those local advocates and finding out who can be that voice for you with decision makers can really help speak for these funds. So really biggest thing with ESSA is just to remember funding streams that are now open because of the well-rounded definition, and then also the shift from core academic subjects to well-rounded subjects.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. That was a really great overview to a pretty complicated topic. But there's a couple of first off, I think we need to celebrate the fact that music and arts programming is listed in there, because this took decades of advocacy work from people at NAM and NAFME and really big organizations to even get that included. So the fact that that language was included in the last bill is a huge win and continues to build momentum, because now we have federal legislation that says music is part of a well-rounded education, and it's the state's responsibility to provide that well-rounded education. That's fabulous. So LaDonna, you have twice been to Washington, D.C. and advocated for music education, specifically the funding as it relates to these grants. You have met with the elected officials that are on these committees in Washington. What does all of this mean, and how can we implement this into how does it work at the local level? How can educators see access to some of these funds and use it to benefit their program?
Well, like Todd said, which was absolutely the best explanation I have heard to understand was what Todd just gave us. I think, and Todd, feel free to correct me here because you're much more up on the actual ESSA part of it, but a lot of schools get 30,000 or less in funding. And if they get less than 30,000, then they don't have to split this money up over the three parts, the three areas. They can do it all in one area. Now, the one catch that came up when this first started was that the second area, safe and healthy school, this was during the time when, and it's as it should be, the safe part of school was a big deal, and all schools were pretty much using the money from what I understood to make their schools safer. And that was, that was just going to happen. If your school gets over 30,000, then there's a needs assessment. And if I'm understanding right, that is some of the cases is where some of the money goes back to Title I and spent through this area. So there's a lot of understanding there too. But for the local level, the states all wrote their own program, and they had 6 parts that had to be included. And one of those parts is the school report card, which is touchy. And it's got a lot of areas where you want to just go, really? Does this have to be in the school report card for all schools? And mind you, in the testing, we're testing 100% students. It's all students that are included in this testing too. But one thing that arts people can say to the report card, a big factor in that is school attendance. That can raise the grade. And graduation, the percentage of students who graduate also can raise the grade. So there we are. The arts people need to say, our program, here's the facts. The students involved in arts programs, more of them are graduating, and their attendance is better also. So that's one big area. I know in smaller schools, that's one big area where arts people can really talk to this for the reason that some of these funds need to go into some areas that they may need the money from.
Yeah, that's such a great point, LaDonna. I mean, if we put on our administrator hat and think about the things that probably keep our school counselors and our principals up at night, it's probably things like graduation rates, drug and alcohol usage, social connectedness. There's so many different things that keep them up at night. And we have so much research about how music makes a positive impact on people, that kids involved in music are more likely to graduate on time, go on and go to college, get higher ACT and SAT scores. They read at a higher level. They learn a foreign language faster. All of these great advocacy stats. And so we've got to connect the dots to say, want to raise the graduation rates? Music. We've got the statistic to show how that makes a difference. So that's a great point.
One thing also, Nick, just real quick, that's if anyone's from Missouri listening to this, that bill was introduced by Lamar Alexander. And if you remember too, Lamar is a very much proactive or advocate for music education. So thank him, and Missouri thank him for that.
Yeah. There's some great research through Quadrant Research. If I know that Nola mentioned Bob Morrison, who's the founder of Quadrant Research, but tracing Lamar Alexander's input to this as well. So Lamar actually used to be a Secretary of Education, so he's been a great advocate for a well-rounded education for the past number of years. One thing I'll add to what LaDonna was saying about the school report card piece, that is a large component of what ESSA does for especially the state accountability models, is that all the states had to submit their own ESSA plans, and many of them were so quick to develop those plans as soon as the legislation was signed, so they could just get the funding and start. That arts were really kind of overlooked from a lot of those state plans. And I'm a member of a national cohort of people that have my job at similar state agencies across the country. And we are noticing a trend that many states are now starting to revise their ESSA plans to include some arts accountability models. There's some great things happening in Georgia related to that, being a part of the College and Career Readiness Index. Also, Ohio's done some great work, and Connecticut and New Jersey have all started including some arts measures as part of ESSA. And one thing that's important for us to remember, what gets measured gets done. And so being an advocate to see arts become a part of an accountability model, and not here to talk about what my vision for that would look like for this state, but that is a vision that I have in my state. I would love to see us get to a point where Tennessee has some degree of arts accountability through ESSA. I think that's, at this point, who knows how long down the road that is for us. I would estimate that's a 5-year process for us to even start talking about it. But to figure out ways that we can get arts to the forefront in the accountability model means that we'll start paying more attention at all levels of whether it's state government down to local to school administrators on how do we really improve our arts programs.
Yeah. And Todd, I think you brought up a good point that I don't want to take for granted. The applications were done by state. So basically each state submitted an application to the Department of Education that says, this is how we are going to implement the ESSA guidelines within our state. And so each state has a different criteria, and this is public knowledge. You can go and actually pull your state's application and read what exactly they say about music accessibility within your state. And to your point, some of them were broad because they were done very quickly, but some of them have music listed in there, and some states have done a really great job. So that's a really powerful tool I think all educators need to be aware of, is what does my state's application say as it relates to music accessibility, because this can guide local conversations and expectations. Because the state has to comply to get those ESSA federal dollars. So, and Todd, I know you're going to share some resources, but we can probably help people find those applications. They're pretty easy. You just Google search, Tennessee ESSA application and can find it. Okay, well, let's keep moving forward. So again, I think we have to lay the foundation of that, because so many of our conversations start with well-rounded student and the role that music plays in that. So we've got to do that. So Nola, let's talk about this. If there's a school right now talking about cuts and budgets and the role of music, what encouragement or advice would you offer an educator to help them advocate from a reactive stance the importance of music in the program?
Well, it's just important that we be very, very visible right now, and that we're just because we're not in the building, we're not in the community in 3D doesn't mean that we can't be virtually. And I think a lot of directors across the country are doing a really good job of keeping their students and their programs front of mind by the work that they're doing online. That doesn't mean that you all have to go do a virtual marching band. In fact, I would discourage that at this point. But there are ways to be front of mind. It's a local level. It's making sure that the parents are staying engaged and that they're staying front of mind with the school board, and that they're asking the questions, what are we doing to make sure that every student has access to music and arts in this new normal for now? We want to know that you're talking about it as a school board. We want to know that there is a plan for this and that we're not just waiting for it to happen. In other words, we're asking our educational leaders, we're asking to be thought partners with them on how we can make sure that this happens. And that's critical, because we're the only people who do this work. And without that, the social emotional learning piece is going to be hugely impacted. So that's important. And if we can think of ways to stay front of mind, making sure that our parents are active, that doesn't mean sticking them on the school board per se, but just that they're asking the questions and making sure that they're elevating their expectations, that, you know, we know your commitment has not lessened in the face of this adversity. Now is the time to be even more committed.
Yeah, that's a great point, Nola. And I think you bring up maybe a good way to maybe not advocate for music education. There's a way that can be very damaging to our program, and you might have just mentioned one of them right there. That can be a really dangerous card to play, so we should be very careful doing that. I think that's such a good point. Todd, I want to bounce over to you, because Nola brings up a good point about being proactive. And I mean, through all of this, the definition of well-rounded student has not disappeared, even though we're learning from home. And so how can we continue to communicate that with our administrators that, okay, so maybe we're not getting classroom time, but music still has a role in all of this?
Yeah, and that's been one of the things. So one of the things as we started entering the COVID-19 situation, I guess almost 2 months ago now at this point, is that from my angle at the Department of Education, I wanted to produce some school closure guidance about what the impacts to arts educators and arts education programs could mean for students. And so I produced a really nice document that kind of outlines in all the different arts disciplines some considerations, and really from the lens of saying some of the things from an official standpoint to administrators that sometimes teachers don't feel empowered to discuss. Like thinking through what this does to recruitment, how we're looking forward to encouraging administrators and counselors to, hey, you're going to have to be a little patient with scheduling in the fall because we've not had a chance to recruit, so expect schedule changes, but we can all find ways to work through that together. So just those kinds of high-level considerations that might start administrators thinking about planning for the future. And one of the things that I was really passionate about in that document was making sure that administrators are partnering with their arts educators to help make those kinds of decisions. But I think what's really important, and to add on to what we were just saying about the advocacy piece, is we have to remember advocacy is two things. It's effective storytelling coupled with data. And we always have to have some data to back up decisions these days. It's just the name of the game. This is what I was talking about earlier, is learning to speak the language of your stakeholders. Many of our decision makers and our stakeholders have to have data. We always back away from that in the arts education world, but the data does exist. There are things for us to consult. So some great resources, and I'll make sure that Nick gets these to blast out to the attendees today, but for some Title IV resources, there's some great toolkits out there from NAFME. The NAFME Title IV toolkit is fantastic with some great resources about how to be an advocate, lots of frequently asked questions. There's some great resources through the NAM Foundation and also through VH1 Save the Music toolkit. And then from a lot of the things that I was just saying about the local funding in Tennessee, you can actually access your district's application. They annually submit an application to the State Department that details how they use the federal programs, because the State Department is the channel through which those funds are delivered. And that's through a resource called ePlan. And it's really cumbersome to get through, but if you really want to go digging, you can find out some answers to your questions if you're a Tennessee person there. Two other resources I'll also mention. There's some great work being done at the Arts Education Partnership. They've got some great ESSA resources about the arts as well. And then always with Americans for the Arts, or AFTA. They have some phenomenal resources, and actually did a tour. I was able to participate with this tour back in October that hopefully many of you may have attended, around the state about becoming an advocate. That was hosted in conjunction with the Arts Ed Tennessee campaign and the initiative as well. But again, finding those stories to tell and backing it up with some data through things like the graduation rate or through the social emotional component is something that's going to be really on the forefront. It's what my cohort of national folks are talking about right now, is the arts and the intersections with SEL. And I think that's going to be a big push for us in the next 2 years or so. And C-Day is the name of that resource. I'll make sure that Nick gets all these so all the attendees can have this later.
Thanks, Todd. And listen, I've never heard that definition of advocacy, but I love that.
Mhm.
Creative storytelling coupled with data. Because when you say it like that, you realize anybody can do this. Anybody can tell a story. And we're in music. I mean, we've got a ton of stories to tell. I mean, we make people's lives better. So there's tons of stories to tell. We've just got to communicate it. So LaDonna, we're approaching our hour. I'm going to ask a question, and then we're going to go around the panel and get any closing thoughts or advice. LaDonna, you're at the local level, you're at the school board. How much knowledge is there at the local level about ESSA, and how can we as educators proactively communicate what it is, maybe with administrators that are not aware of some of the resources that are available to our schools?
There's not a lot of information. I mean, there's plenty of information to find, but administrators that I've talked with don't know a lot about this. And we actually talked about this 2 years ago and looked at the school's plan, or what the funding was for the school and how it could be spent and where it said music in it and the arts. But that was during the time when the safe and healthy school had to take precedence, which was understandable. It's just a matter of education, but it's difficult because they are bombarded with so many things, especially superintendents. If you have a person aside from the superintendent in the school that takes care of the federal programs, that's the person to talk with and make sure that they see that this is, and you can do that without making them feel like they don't know what they're doing, but that we talk about the arts part in Title IV-A and separate that from what the rest of it is and what it's saying. And like I said, the thing that hit home with our school was the attendance and graduation rates, and why that raised eyebrows for the administrators, especially, to look at ESSA.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, from a local level, we could be leaving federal dollars on the table and not fully utilizing them to support our arts programs. And so sometimes just being aware and having that conversation, we shouldn't take for granted our administrators know and are writing the appropriate grants necessary to get access to the funds. So we could be leaving a lot of money on the table that we could be accessing through some of these block grants that Todd talked about. So again, a lot of resources out there. Todd, LaDonna, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on ESSA. I know that's a complicated topic. So, and I appreciate the work that all of our panelists are doing to continue to advocate for music education. So on that note, we're going to just say any final thoughts as well as any advice that you want to share with the group as it relates to advocacy. So Nola, we'll kick it off with you.
Well, just to tag on to what they're saying about ESSA, what I would tell you from personal experience is that it moves at the speed of a glacier, and then all of a sudden it's done. So you have to start advocating well in advance and tie it into your district's plan. It's not going to happen overnight. A lot of districts are just sweeping it into Title I in terms of Title IV funding. They just sweep it into Title I because it's easier and there's less paperwork. And so you have to get the attention of the federal grants manager in your district and get on their radar and forge this alliance to make this happen. You're going to need to be creative in terms of how you're going to impact children. There's some great success stories on the NAM Foundation website that Todd referenced earlier. And so it'll take a minute, but it's doable. Don't let the fact that somebody tells you no mean really no. It might just mean not now, not yet. And stay positive, link arms, find people that are willing to help. I'll make a plug for Consummer Institute that we're doing virtually in the summer. There's a lot of things that we're doing with regard to what the impact will be in the fall. If there's anything any of us can do to help you, I'm a phone call or a bat signal away, especially now that I have power. And so we just want to help everybody get through this and stay positive, because children are still children and teachers are still the heroes.
That's right. Absolutely. And Nola, do you mind, for anybody that might not be familiar with Consumer Institute, this is a great program that you all offer. Can you just give us a little plug on what that is, what you cover, and how an educator can get more information on that?
Oh, sure. Well, it's been a 3-day event live in Elkhart that many of you have attended. And now we're going virtually this year for 2 days, June 8 and 9. And then there's a marching band workshop on June 10 and 11. So, and we have deep discounts for our state associations, Mississippi Bandmasters, Tennessee Bandmasters, pretty much anybody. And so if you need information on that, just reach out to me. I'll get that done for you as well. It's a 2-day virtual seminar with about 40 different faculty members, everybody from Richard Saucedo to Paula Kreider to Frank Troika to Larry Livingston to Alfred Watkins, Myra Roden, John, the list goes on. And the great news is that you will have access to all those sessions topics until the end of 2020. So if you want to, say if you are an aspiring arts administrator and you're in the band track, well, you can go back and access all of the arts administrator track. We have a special track for collegiates, a special track for new teachers. So if there's a session that interests you, you can access all of them until the end of the year. We've extended the early bird pricing of $129 through May 15th. And then again, we're giving discounts to all of our state associations. There's a discount pretty much out there for everybody if you want to go. So we'd love to have you. We'd love to see you there with us. We think it's going to be powerful. And if everything gets lifted and we can all be at the beach that week, then you'll still be able to access it till the end of the year.
Fabulous. Thanks, Nola. And it's a wonderful program. I mean, what y'all do through the Consumer Division of Education is wonderful. So thank you for your support to music education. And the lineup for that every year is just top notch. It's good stuff.
Well, thank you. One other thing I would add is that if you're in need of professional development credit hours, we do extend professional development certificates.
Great. Fabulous.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And so if you've got any more questions, feel free to direct those to Nola about the Consumer Institute. Really great program. Todd, any closing thoughts or advice you'd like to share with the group?
I'm so glad that Nola mentioned the professional organization. One of the things that's really important for arts educators to remember, especially as we're entering this new environment with COVID-19 and what post-COVID world looks like, and then the advocacy that we sense coming down the pike that we might need, is that we have to remember we cannot do this work alone. Arts educators so often are siloed into their jobs. I know of people that teach in the most remote and fringe rural locations in the state that are the single art teacher in their entire county. Maybe they're going back and forth between 4 or 5 different schools, but they're it. And it's so easy to feel siloed and to feel alone in the job that we're doing. So it's really important to build a network of support for you as an arts educator, whether you teach music, visual art, whatever. And the first way to do that is to make sure that you're an active member of your professional organizations, whether it's regional like WTSBOA or the vocal associations or general music associations or the offshore work associations, and then also, of course, TMEA and also NAFME. These networks, while yes, it is an investment, there's costs associated with it. That may be something that your school pays, it may be something that you pay personally, but the value is absolutely priceless. You have to have that network of support to be able to bounce ideas, but also just because these organizations are how we grow as a profession, and how you get armed with the resources through professional development, through providing opportunities for students. So find a network of support to help you in your advocacy work, because you cannot just do it alone. You already do all the great work in the front lines and in the trenches every day. So try to make your load as light as possible by finding those people that can be your support system.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Todd. And if you need help finding your support system, again, Todd's got all of the people on this panel, including those of us at Amro Music, would be more than happy to help give some direction and insight onto what support systems might be available to you. So LaDonna, any closing thoughts or advice you want to share with the group?
Just a couple of things. One, if you're a music educator, remember that ESSA, and this is the last thing about ESSA that I would say is for all students, and that includes minorities, students receiving special education, students in poverty, and students with limited English learning skills. So do you teach any of those? And obviously for arts educators, the answer is you teach all of those. And so this money is for all students. So remember that when you're looking at the funds and where you may can use those funds. And the last thing is stay positive. This can be the worst time ever, or this can be an open door to rebuild and recreate what could be the best year next year that you've ever had. Stay positive with your school, even when you don't feel positive. When talking to your counselor about your schedule, they know that the beginning of the year is going to be different for everybody. And I feel certain that most of them will work with you if you start now to remind them that you didn't get the full recruiting time maybe, and you need that, or these students didn't have internet and they feel behind. They're not, they need to stay in band. Help me keep my students in the program. We're going to have the best year ever. When you see a parent or a student and they say, or they email or whatever, they say, what are we going to do? Say, we're going to make this and we're working toward the best year we've had. Don't tell them you don't know what you're going to do. And don't tell them that, you know, it is what it is, because actually, and I read this week, and this is perfect because I hate that statement, but the second part, it is what you make it. So keep your head up. We know already that arts people are the best people ever. So keep your head up, move forward, and yes, ask for help. When you want to vent, call somebody you know you can vent to, but don't let it be your kids and parents. Let them know that this is the time to move forward and make great things happen.
Yeah, that's such powerful advice we all need to hear right now. So, to our wonderful panel, Nola, LaDonna, Todd, thank you so much. Y'all were wonderful. I am extremely grateful and appreciate your willingness to come on here and share your expertise. Next week, again, we're going to be talking about marching band. Again, we've got some questions, we all do, but we're going to turn our attention to that and just explore maybe what marching band could look like under a couple of different scenarios. So we've got a wonderful panel lined up. Again, you'll need to register if you want to be a part of that conversation, as our Zoom ID is going to change. And then lastly, we've got some directors asking, hey, what are we going to do with after hours when all this is over? And we haven't decided yet, but we would love your input. Is this something that we need to keep doing? What topics would you like for us to talk about? How frequently should we do it? We're loving doing this. I'm learning a lot. I think all of our attendees are learning a lot. So let's talk about what the format should be moving into the future, because just because schools might begin to open back up in the fall doesn't mean that we have to let these learning opportunities continue to end. So shoot me an email, nick@amromusic.com, and share your thoughts, because I'd love to hear from you. Again, to all of our panelists, thank you so much. To all of our attendees, thank you for being here. Have a wonderful week. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week at After Hours. Okay, people signing off. Thank you guys. Todd, LaDonna, Nola jumped off there, but y'all were fast.